So again, everyone, welcome. First of all, to our diversity career series, talking about kind of navigating, negotiating the offer. And so my name is Mark Williams. I am one of the senior program advisors for community and professional development programs. Still learning how to say this. So want to thank you for being here today. We have our guest panelists here today. We'll allow them an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then we're going to leave this as an opportunity for students to ask questions and our guests to ask questions. We have some questions just to kind of get things started, but we want to hear from you. So feel free to put it in the chat. If you have any questions for our panelists, and I think we're going to have a wonderful conversation. I'm excited. So if you came ready to learn, if you came eager for an opportunity to get some good meat, as they like to say, I think our panelists will be able to provide that. So I want to start off with Natasha. If you can introduce yourself, tell us more about who you are and just as we prepare, maybe one fun fact about yourself. Yeah, it's the interviewing questions. I know.
All right. So I gotta, in the back of my mind while I'm talking, I think of something fun, and I'm a new mom, so things aren't that fun right now. But my name is Natasha Montgomery, and I work for GE Appliances in Louisville, Kentucky, and I've been with the business for roughly 11 years. My title is HR Senior Manager, and I support our operations for the most part. So EHS quality, supplier quality, and I support roughly 500 folks. And I've been in HR for, I would say 16 years. So time flies. So roughly 16 years. I actually started working out at GE, leading intern programs and leadership programs. So that's how I got my start here. And then I moved on to plants. So fun fact, gosh, I'm thinking, I would say, this is years and years ago, I once climbed on a chair that probably wasn't that stable to meet the president. So at the time it was President Obama, but I climbed on the chair and he finally shook my hand and asked me to get down. This probably looked unsafe. So that's all I have.
Thank you for that. That's a great fun fact. The fact that he even said, hey, get down.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And thank you for sharing a little bit about your background. And next we have Kara.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kara Howard, and I am a campus talent acquisition manager with Cintas Corporation. I have been with them for over 11 years, and I've had 5 different positions with them. So I started right out of college as a management trainee, and then was able to go into a sales rep position, supervisor position. I moved from Illinois to Tennessee, which is where I'm at now and have been for almost 9 years. And I was a service supervisor. So these little trucks that you see out on the road, I had about 14 of those that went out to customers. And so I was in charge of them and got to grow and lead and develop, which is what I love to do. And then I got promoted to this campus talent acquisition manager role about 3 years ago. So I cover the southeastern portion of the United States. Again, I live in Tennessee, and so I work with amazing schools like University of Kentucky, go Cats, to find top talent for our management trainee program. So that's really my sole responsibility. That's my baby, is to find, it'll be about 100 management trainees this year. Just in my territory, we're hiring about 325 management trainees, so graduating seniors over this next year. So I work with the universities, I work with my local leadership, and really find that top talent for this program that trains these candidates to be general managers in a short 5 to 6 years, which is really, really cool. So You probably, like I said, you've probably seen Cintas around and maybe you don't know too much about it, but we get over 1 million customers ready for the workday with the rental of uniforms, floor mats, towels, first aid products, first aid kits, AED machines, sprinkler systems, exit lights, and fire extinguishers. So we're a business heavily based on compliance. And I'll tell you 2 fun facts. How about that? I'll tell you a past and a present one. So I kind of exaggerated. Today is an exciting day, not like the actual work day as much. It's just been a Monday, but the end of the day is cool. So I'll explain. My first one is that I played drums for 8 years, which is pretty cool. And then I am sporting a Dia de los Muertos shirt today. My husband and I have taken on something called Tribe at our church, and it's for young adults. So anybody that's from like 18 to 30. And so tonight is our kickoff night. We're super excited. We're going with the Day of the Dead theme. And it's really, really cool to be able to plug into our community to help other people. So not only do I do this for a living where I get to help you, but I also get to be a resource in my community too to young adults. So I'm super happy to be here. Please feel comfortable with Natasha and me to ask questions, and let's have fun.
Well, thank you for that introduction as well as those fun facts. I feel like I kind of put y'all on the spot, so it's only fair that I too offer a fun fact. You know, you always say don't do if I can't ask for people to do stuff if I can't do it myself here. So I would say a fun fact about me is that a lot of people don't realize I talk about Michigan a lot. I grew up in Michigan, but I was actually born in California. And being born in California, I have not gone back since we left. So it's one of my goals is to go back at some point and see where I was born and, you know, where it all started. So my mom kept promising that she would send me, and she still tells me today. And I just told her, just put a down payment on the plane ticket. I'll handle the rest. So, but we are here not to talk about California, but we're here to talk about negotiating this process of offer letters. And so I'm going to start off with a question, but again, for all of our people who are here today, feel free to ask questions, put them in the chat, raise your hand. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So the first question we're going to start off with is, how do I start the conversation about negotiating with a potential employer?
I can take this one, or Kara, would you like to? Okay. So when my friends and family come to me and they ask me, Tasha, what do I do if I want more money? And I always tell them about something that happened to me early on in my HR career. I was actually a contractor for G at the time, and I was working with interns. And at the time, and I had to make an offer for a regular hire. And as soon as I made the offer, he just came back and said, "Is that negotiable?" And it just opened the conversation, right? So it's really just one question you can ask. They're going to say yay or nay, but regardless, they're going to have to take a step back and give you a response. And it's really just one question that can open that dialogue, which is that negotiable? As soon as that salary's set out, you just drop that line, and they're going to take a step back and say, yay, nay, let me get back with you, or let me know what you're thinking, right? So they can understand what you're looking for. So I always coach friends and family to, never anybody I'm making an offer to, but friends and family to open with that line, and it opens that dialogue.
Yeah, I am spot on with that too. And I would say just having the conversation and the way that you approach the question really says a lot too, that if it comes off as like, I don't want this position, if it's not negotiable, that could be a red flag then for our leaders saying, hey, I don't think that this is going to be enough money for them. I don't know that they'll be satisfied. And if, like for us, we paint the vision for the management training program. So you come in at 50,000, but in 5 to 6 years, you're making 200,000 as a general manager. So there's a lot that goes on in between that. But if they just only look at that initial offer, which I know that we'll probably talk about later, but that could deter us from moving forward with them, and they may not mean it that way. So the way that you come off with asking that question, I think practicing humility is going to be huge with asking that. And then also research before you ask that question. And again, to Natasha's point, it's totally good to ask that question and to have that open conversation. You want to have open conversation with your potential employer. You want to be able to talk about things and not be scared or nervous to do so. But you also can do your due diligence and look up and see what some of these positions may show. I mean, you can look online and see for Cintas, we do not negotiate our management trainee salaries. And then I think it's really important, and something that as employers, sometimes we don't do enough of, is like explaining the why, right? There's a why behind not being able to negotiate it. Some industries, some positions, that's totally normal. For us, if we have somebody that graduated last year coming in at 50, and then you just graduated and you come in at 52, you have less experience than them. You were on equal playing field, and now, like, why should you get paid more than them? Now you've created an issue within the workplace. And if somebody said something about their salary, then all of a sudden like, well, why am I not making that? And I'm a year ahead of this person, and I did 10 more things during college and had a better GPA. So it's an employee morale issue too sometimes. But if you don't know that and you don't ask, it can be confusing and make you want to shut down.
Mm-hmm. Totally agreed, Kara. Totally agree. Yeah, when you do want to negotiate or have that conversation, you do have to take a step back and not just ask yourself the question, I just want more money. So what am I bringing to the table? What's required of me in this role? And do I have to work nights, weekends, and what's the rest of the compensation package? Are there benefits? Are there bonuses? Do salary increases happen once a year, twice a year? Those are all questions that you should ask yourself before you want to open and up that dialogue with that employer. And fair pay is fair pay. And another thing that also kind of plays into it is just the market, right? And that's not going to be easy to find on salary.com, but the company margins, I'm in appliances. The margins on a refrigerator, they're not the margins on airplanes, right? We're all being honest with each other. So if the margins are tighter, that means that company may not have the flexibility, right? So those are all factors that go into compensations. And we have this dialogue every year with our employees during salary planning, but there's a lot of factors. So you have to think, first think, what am I bringing to the table? And to, along with that is, what does the job entail?
And before we segue into the next question, I want to put it out there to see if anybody had any questions. Again, you can unmute yourself or put it in the chat.
I have a question. So I was just wondering if there was obviously you don't want to ask to negotiate an offer before you even get the job offer, but is there a point where it's too early to ask to negotiate, if that's even a possibility, or if there's even a point where it's too late, if you've already been in the job for a few months, would you just have to wait until the next scheduled salary increases, or could you ask to negotiate even after you've already been in the job?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you so much for asking that. I would say for us, and I can only speak to my industry and this specific job that I recruit for, but when you are in the interview process, there's a 4-step interview process for management trainees. I would say that, first of all, I put the salary out there before I even do a screening interview. I put it out there because that may completely deter somebody and say, no, I don't want to, just based off of that alone. And that, to me, great. Then that means that's somebody who wasn't looking for a career with Cintas. So that works for both of us then. So I put it out there and I paint the vision. And so I would say that at some point in that interview process, between your due diligence of looking up to see if you can find out the salary or not, and then you need to ask. I think that everybody, you want to get paid, you got to live. So it's okay to ask. It's when you ask every single time or you ask multiple times in an interview, then it just shows that the shining star for you is money. And that becomes a red flag for us as employers. And then I would say too, like at the end, after the final interview, that's when we make the decision to offer a candidate. And then that's when I would say, hey, it's $50,000. Here's the offer letter. And you could say, is this negotiable? Is there any wiggle room here? And then that's when we'll have a conversation and say, hey, you're moving 3 hours away. Maybe we'll throw in $1,500, $2,000 as like a relocation package for you. And you may be able to negotiate a little bit there on the front end, even though I can't negotiate the salary, if that makes sense. So again, it's very job specific, but you have every right to ask what that is that you're interviewing for, but know that a little bit of that responsibility falls on your shoulders to ask the question and do some due diligence before the interview as well. But I would never accept a job without knowing what your pay is, your benefits. Like that could be an absolute disaster and make you a job hopper faster than you would ever want to be hopping jobs.
No, all great points, Kara. One of the things that I was never taught early in my career and when I was first looking for work out of college, I always, for me, a lot of times during the interview process, if there's not a set salary, you'll be asked the question, what salary are you looking for? I would be very mindful. Like I tend to coach people, don't just give like one number, give a range and give a pretty wide range and give a range that you feel like the lower end you'll be comfortable with living with. But you can, you just give a very wide range because a lot of times when you're asked that question, the employer feels put on the spot, right? Once you're in the interview process to try to meet that, and they may not be able to. So when they're debriefing after interviewing, they could say, well, maybe not, Peter or Nathan or anyone, maybe not him because we don't really meet his salary requirements, right? Because maybe you overestimate it, but a safe way to play it is always give a pretty wide range. And that way you can keep playing, I'm gonna call it playing ball, right? During the interview process, and you don't really knock yourself out.
And again, that was a fantastic question. And, I told y'all when we first started, there's a lot of great information you're going to get today. So just off the first 2 questions, that's a lot of great information, especially when you start talking about that, the aspect that a lot of people do get that question in the interview. What is your ideal salary piece? So I think definitely hitting on that, as well as just kind of talking about the timeline, it's going to really help some students understand how to begin to negotiate those offers. I want to segue into something else in addition to is what are some other things that students should be considering when negotiating outside of salary? I think too often we focus on maybe the salary and the money, but you started mentioning some benefits. What are some other things that may be components that might be considered in negotiating?
I'll take this one and then I'll toss it over to you, Kara. Sorry. and I have every device here that's buzzing right now. So, some other things that are negotiable could be paid time off, right? An extra week of vacation time, maybe some comp time. I think, at the end of the day, you spend time in the office. So what what you can balance and juggle is that time factor, right? And a lot of different generations focus on different things, and if you're really about work-life balance, or hey, I need to go to the gym during lunch, one of those things that you can really use as a negotiating factor is the gift of time, right? And the expense tied to it. Kara, do you have anything on that one?
No, I think you're absolutely spot on with just, seeing what else, if there's anything, say that the salary is not everything that you want, maybe there's another piece of it. It doesn't hurt to ask. Again, I think it all comes down to the way you ask. If it comes like extremely expectant, or comes across as too much of like, what can the company do for me, not what can I do for the company? Because you have to think, you're going into the company to solve problems and to be a solution. You haven't quite earned it yet. So just be realistic with some of those things too. You're not going to come in getting 2 months vacation when you have somebody who's been there for 20 years, not there yet either. So you have to tailor your expectations on the answer. And if you're going to ask, know that you may be disappointed with that. But again, don't lose the vision of what the company in the future looks like for you, because that could come in the form of your 401k. That can come in the form of your medical, dental, and vision benefits. That can come into the form, like Natasha said, flexibility with your schedule. I've moved states, I've sold houses, I've had emergencies, I've had anything and everything happen. Cintas has never said, Carrie, you need to stay and get this done. They said, go do what you got to do. To me, having that peace of mind and knowing my job is not, on the chopping block for anything that comes up in life happening, I think that is money in itself for peace of mind and working for a stable company. So I think those are all things to take into consideration when you're negotiating too.
Yeah, I just thought of one though, as you were talking, Kara, professional, associations and trainings and conferences. I have had people say, I'm really, am, part of NSBE. Will you pay for my, for me to attend that conference? And I think that's one other thing that you could kind of put on that table, along with what, Kara and I were speaking of, that time and flexibility piece.
That's a great point. That's fantastic.
And for our guests that are watching, especially for our students, I'm gonna give you a little piece of advice. Summers off are no longer an option. You gonna feel the difference that first year. Like your body just says in May, like time off, and then they say you're gonna be here on Monday, right? Like, right. Oh yeah, I'm be here on Monday. So
Mark, I have to tell you, my first job out of college, I think I graduated in like August, and so I'm working. So December came, and I was like, oh, thank God Christmas break is coming, right? I don't know why my mind was still programmed around Christmas break. There is no Christmas break. You may get a day or two off, but there's no Christmas break. And that was my first, aha, oh gosh, this is a real world moment. So
it happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
And I tell you, even me working at a university, sometimes I'm like, ooh, that May, it looks, no, still working.
That makes me think of something else. I'm glad you brought it up too, Natasha. Negotiate when you start. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was talking to one of my executives today because we were offering a student, and so we're like, I tell my candidates, hey, you'll never get this opportunity to have the ability to take some time off in between. Now, not everybody can do that. If you have the ability to do that, take some time off and negotiate that instead of maybe graduating and then the next week starting a job. Say, hey, I'd like to start after, the 4th of July. And those are all other things that you can negotiate that you might not think about in the business world.
That's a
Yeah,
great
that's
point.
excellent, Kara. Yeah.
And hopefully this is offering, a different perspective on how to think about what you're negotiating for. Because even for professional development, like student association fees sometimes are like $35, $10. But when you become a professional in your respective careers and industries, those things can run into the hundreds. And so, you might have had a big salary, but there's $100 something coming out of that check. So again, there are multiple things to look at in there. So I want to open up again for any questions from our students or any of our guests.
I see Sarah.
Hey, hi, Kara. I had a question.
There.
I was thinking about some of the students that we coach and advise, and a lot of times they get nervous that if they try to negotiate that the offer is going to be rescinded. So can you talk to them a little bit about like the timing of that, and would that actually happen, or what do they need to wait, before they have those conversations? They just get a little nervous about the company being like, what? They're asking me for things. No, we're out of here. So can you talk a little bit about that?
You can go ahead, Kara. I think she was asking you.
Oh, yeah. So I would say, and I understand that sentiment completely, but I think that as a student, you have to also question, like, am I at the right company if they're so quick to take this off the table with me? Because again, I think it comes back to like a mutual relationship, two-way street of them wanting you, you wanting them, and you wanting to make this work. So if they yank it off the table, I would caution you as to maybe that is a blessing in disguise. If that happens to you, I don't know any employers who have done that. You're not going to hurt my feelings or my executives' feelings if you say, hey, at the end when we offer you, you say, hey, is this negotiable? Can I get more out of this? And we have a conversation about it. I'm not going to get mad. My executives aren't going to be like, oh, they just want too much already. They're going to be a problem. We don't think like that. We think a little bit more on the lines of like, we don't want to lose this candidate because they're so awesome. What can we talk to them about? What can we do on our end to let them see the vision that it's not just the initial offer, that there's so much more to it? And that could come in the form of like talking through the benefit summary with the days off and the 401k and all of that good stuff. And then we actually share our general manager's bonus plan. And so I'll have my general manager go through and like talk to that candidate that's going to be working for them, hopefully, and go through in detail what their pay is, what that looks like. And so we take it like, we don't want to lose you, but you also have to understand why we can't too. And if you really want this job, we're going to work together, but to yank it off the table, I will tell you the time that I've yanked an offer off the table is because we've given a week for them to respond and they haven't responded, or they are saying, hey, I'm still interviewing with another company and want to finish it up. Well, if you're still interviewing with another company and you are more concerned about finishing with them than accepting the offer with us, then you don't want us in our eyes. And you've surpassed the time limit that we've given you. We no longer are interested. We'd rather cut ties and start looking for a candidate who does want Cintas and who it's a mutual relationship with. So that would be the time that we would cut ties. You can only play the game so long with an offer before you do offend the one that maybe you do want. So keep that in mind, that if you really want a company, it's okay to say, yes, I really want you to, and to say yes to the offer. And it's also okay to say, hey, I want this one more. This offer's up. I'm going to refuse yours, Cintas, and I'm going to go for them because that's really where my heart's at. And I think that that's okay to say too. You just have to be honest and communicate and be open. No love is lost at that point.
Yeah. So Kara, all great points. And so I'm just to calm fears around, will they yank an offer if I want to discuss salary? We are a company where I've never seen in 11 years us yank an offer, right? So just to calm folks' fears around that, essentially, it goes back to everything that Kara said. It's all about communication, right? If you were that candidate the whole time that gave a range, we're flexible, you may have, several interviews going. As long as you're communicating, I do have a couple of interviews. I will let you know by this date and you follow up. That's all relationship building behavior, right? So if you're coming in the door at that company, that employer feels like this person already keeps their word. They followed up with me on the day of, they accepted our offer, or whatever the case may be. But you're talking to them and you're building those communication channels that can only be good for you now or in the future, right, with that company. Because there's so much, a lot of times, you may interview with the company and you may not, have any dealings with them, for a couple of years, but you may come back to them. So as long as you keep that open communication, the follow up, the follow through, it's just like Kara mentioned, there's no harm in us talking, to you about salary. We're not going to rip offers off the table. And like she mentioned, buyer beware if the company does, because that don't sound right, right? So, but yeah, the other thing is I did want to make mention of is there are times where you may ask or want to ask how much does this job pay? I think, or, what's the salary range for the job? It is highly unlikely that company is going to give you the range, right? If we're always being honest with you, I'm not going to go on a call with somebody and just say, oh, this job pays 93 to 157K. I'm not going to give you that wide range, right? Like that's never going to happen. But I think you want to have conversations around, like I mentioned, the range. This is probably where I sit right next to my counterparts who are, equally educated or have equal amount of experience. But just be careful on that question. What is the range and what is the pay? Just because you're probably not going to get a fully transparent answer, right? But you as coming out of the field, you kind of have an idea of what the market is paying, right? And like Kara mentioned, do your research and walk in with some knowledge and don't really ask for that company to feed you and be 100% transparent, because we don't post that anywhere internally, so we're not going to share it externally. So I just want this team to be aware of that.
Thank you. That is really helpful.
Thank you for that question. Are there any other questions? So I do have another question. It was kind of mentioned and implied about having kind of these multiple offers or trying to figure out which company is the best fit. So if you have multiple offers, how do you use that as a part of the negotiation, or do you use it as a part of it?
Do you want to go, Kara, or you want me to take it?
You go ahead.
If you have multiple offers and the industries are different and the work is slightly different, I will first tell you to follow your heart where you think you're going to find most enjoyment in the work. How you can use it. It kind of goes back to what I was mentioning before, just being open, right? With the hiring process, it may take the company 3 days a week to call you back, and you may have gotten another offer in, or you're already debating on that and you were waiting to hear on the one from, GE Appliances. Just say, I have another offer. I do, and just be honest, I do like the work I will be doing there. I think I'll get more training opportunities or leadership opportunities, but this company offered me a little bit more. So I'm a little, but I'm more attracted to this role. Can we talk about, maybe increasing the open amount of the offer you gave me, right? And just have that conversation. But yeah, I think you're going to have to express that you're leaning towards that company more for them to have that conversation with you. I would say that, right? Because you don't want to make it seem like you're fishing, you're looking, you're about money, because you do send some red flags. And it's, again, no one's going to yank an offer, but how you come into a company is very important. You're building your brand through your interview. You're building your brand on the first day, what you wear, what you say, and so you want to be very mindful about how to handle that conversation. But I think it just goes back to being open, and these are uncomfortable conversations, and they're awkward, and you may think the person may get mad if you ask. Those are all things I thought when I was in college or coming out and interviewing. It's just not true, right? Like this is a paper play, right? You're working, we pay you for work, so we have to talk money, right? And I'm not gonna get insulted or upset if someone asks for more. I just know I owe them an answer, right? So, and I need to do my homework there. And so this is to think about when you come into a company, it's not personal, it's business. But them getting to know you is the personal piece, right? And you protecting your brand is the personal piece.
Absolutely. And I would say too, I'm involved pretty much in every step of the way. I schedule all the interviews for my management trainees in my territory. And I am emotionally invested. Like, I have been your quarterback through the whole thing. And so when you get to an offer, I'm so thrilled for you. I know that you've wanted this. I've seen the hard work that you put in. And you're not going to hurt my feelings. You're not going to let anybody else down. I think that sometimes you put too much, we as humans put a lot of pressure on ourselves that we've got to make everybody happy all the time. And that's just not going to be the case. And to Natasha's point, you have to make the decision that is the right one for you, regardless of somebody's going to lose. And when you have multiple offers, you have to think that's pretty impressive to have multiple offers. So kudos to you first and foremost. Second of all, you are you're wanted. Like, that is a really good feeling. So don't then put that pressure on yourself in an exciting time that you're going to let somebody down. Open, honest communication. When I talk to my candidates and they get an offer, I test their temperature and I'm like, so what do you think? And along the way, we're always trying to test temperature to see, like, hey, I know that you're a top talent candidate. What does this look like for you with offers? And they're like, yeah, I'm interviewing with others, but Cintas is my top choice. Don't tell an employer that if that's not true, because when we get to an offer and I think you're going to accept and then you take another one, I'm like, but you told me that I was your top choice. We understand things change, but don't feed me stuff I don't want to hear, because I'm planning to close this out, not find somebody else for that location. You're their person. And so when you tell me that, and then all of a sudden it's shocking, that hurts a little bit as an employer. We get over it, it's fine, whatever. But be honest and say to Natasha's point, hey, I'm leaning towards this other company over Cintas. I love everybody I've met. I just don't know that the industry really fits what I'm looking for, but I do, I am very still excited about it. Then to me, I'm like, we've got a 50-50 shot, And so now I can kind of wrap my brain around, I need to source for candidates then to fill this need that may be turned down. This offer is going to be turned down with us. Or I can say, I can focus my efforts somewhere else because they're going to accept the offer. So for me, that's where kind of I lie between it. And again, just be open and honest about it. And if I think the thing that really stings the most is when I ask a candidate, hey, are you do you have offers with other companies? And they say, well, I'm interviewing, but nothing's like coming to fruition. And then they either accept an offer during the interview process, or they say no at the end when we offer them. And I'm like, where were you at through this process of telling me that this was happening? Like, you don't necessarily owe it to the employer, but again, to Natasha's point, which is spot on, if you you don't want to start off in the company looking like, rude or that, you're playing this game hardcore. So those are just kind of my thoughts on it, because I've been burned with offers. It happens all the time. Don't take it personally, but you got to tell them what you're thinking. You got to tell them, hey, Kara, I love you guys, but I just think the financial world is where I'm going to be happiest. Cool. Good for you. And then when I ask you, if you deny the offer, if you don't accept it, and I ask you like, hey, what could we have done differently? Or like, why did you make that decision? I'm not asking you to make you feel bad. I'm asking you because I'm a recruiter. What did I do that I shouldn't have done? Was it our industry? Was it our salary? Was it something I can take back to my executives? Was it somebody you met along the way and they gave you a bad vibe? Like, I need to know that stuff, because that affects any other candidate interviewing in the future. Maybe it's my location. Maybe it's my leadership. Maybe it's the process and the length of it. Those are all things that help us get better. So I call or I'll email. If you don't call or email me back and we cross paths another time, I'm not going to forget that. Like, I know who didn't say something back. And it's like, just have the common courtesy to respond to me. It's a professional thing to do. It's the right thing to do. So that's my 2, 3, 4, and 5 cents on that.
I was trying to do the math, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I was trying to add it up. It took me a while. Still not there yet. So whoever got a calculator, throw the number in the
Mondays, Mark, Mondays.
It's Mondays. But I really appreciate giving us insight from an employer and a recruiter standpoint, because I think too often there's a misconception maybe from one, vantage point of kind of negotiating is kind of off the table, but how, recruiters are also impacted by negotiating or by an offer being denied or accepted. And so when you talk about the relational piece and that give and take, that communication is going to be key. And I tell students all the time, you never know if you ever need to go back somewhere for whatever reason. And if I ever give it a chance to tell you the story, my best friend, he learned that the hard way, in a good way. He said he would never go back to that company. But when I talked to him a couple of years later, he went right on back. So just be mindful of, you never know what your situation can be. So thank you for that insight. And hopefully that's helping us in understanding those negotiation pieces. And just one other thing I'll add is that I also like to tell students to think about your interview process is the beginning of helping you kind of filter out where you may see yourself going based off the questions that you ask. And then if you have multiple offers and you use your consistent questioning, it helps you kind of figure out what you may or may not want to do. So you might want to think about 3 to 5 things you're looking for in that first career move. So if it is salary, if it is location, professional development, and make sure you ask those follow-up questions in the interview. And that will help you kind of understand also some areas you may want to negotiate, but even kind of dwindle down that list a little bit if it comes down to it. Because I think sometimes we talk about like having options until you really have options and making some life choices. And so just something to think about along the way. Any other questions out there?
Hey, Mark, I just thought of something, just popped into my head. I talked to a student one time and they accepted the first offer they got. And they were not into that company. They were not wanting to work for them. And then they ended up continuing to interview after that. And they were asking advice from me on it. I would just suggest that if you don't like the offer from that company, say no to it. Okay. And because I think that if you say yes to an offer and you graduate next May, and it's not one you really want, you're not excited about, and you continue to interview until you get what you really want, that it happens, but it is hard as a recruiter. It takes a long time to find talent, and maybe it's a specific location, or you said you would relocate for it. Then there's so many factors on the employer's end where we're like expecting and excited for this candidate to start. And then all of a sudden but it's not what they wanted in the first place. So my suggestion would just be, if it's not something you're passionate about, if it's not what you want yet, or it just doesn't feel right, don't accept it just because they're the first ones that offer you.
Here, Kara. So agree. So I totally get you, because when I was doing leadership program, interns programs, it's very cyclical, right? So I would have people decline like a month before the start date. I can't go back and get students. You know, everybody knows when career fairs are happening. Everybody knows when the fall, and the good ones are gone. If I find one now, probably not going to be that great, right? So, you know, and that's so upsetting, because, you know, you get the offer, 6-7 months in advance, and you have someone slated and you're building this relationship up into that start date. And if a late decline out of college for a company, when you're only hiring that I guess that profile of a newly graduated, you know, senior or rising senior, that hurts bad. So, and those spots are not easy to fill, and usually your program or whatever it is actually, you know, carries on under headcount because you can't find that talent.
Yeah, and like I said, I appreciate that other perspective. And hopefully it resonates with us to understand that just like we're looking for opportunities, so are companies and recruiters. And the opportunity you're looking for is for you, but that communication helps them then understand what those next steps can be. I'm gonna say for everyone. So that kind of keeps relationships strong in the end. So any other questions?
I had one. So what websites do you recommend to like looking into in order to understand job positions average salary?
I'm going to put one that I love in the chat so that everyone has access to it. We used to use it all the time when I was in grad school, and it's called ONET, and it is based off the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. And why I like it is that you can put the state in there, right? And really figure out, you know, you can't go to a company and say, well, I know y'all pay 65 when you're looking at California, right? It just doesn't equate. So I'll put that in the chat, and hopefully y'all can use that and leverage that. Carol, do you have any?
I don't have any specifically. If I were you, I would go off of what Natasha said, but I mean, I would just type it in and see what pulls up. When you get information on the internet, and I know that everybody knows this, but you have to take it with a grain of salt too, that you can't just like take it verbatim, and there's going to be different opinions and things out there. So sift through that information. I mean, I know that Glassdoor is one. We look at what people say on Glassdoor as a company to see like what outside of us as a company, like what are we portraying to those that worked for Cintas in the past, because we want to always continuously be better. So we do look at that in their comments. And so I know that just looking on there for those purposes of betterment, I've found specific like questions for interviews on there. I've found salaries for different positions. I think that there's a lot of information out there. You just have to realize that not everything is like exact or perfectly accurate. That's why what Natasha said, when you get a range, you're going to fall in that range, and that's going to be probably your best way to approach salary.
Thank you.
Natasha, hey, we love you for this reason. Handshake. You can see ONET on Handshake. If you go on Handshake and you go into the resource section,
Yep.
ONET is there. So you kind of gave us that segue into Handshake. So we just want to thank y'all for that. That was real helpful. So if you don't know how to use Handshake, get on there. Use your Link Blue ID to log in. I always got to put in a shameless plug where I can. So there you go. Any other questions? That was a great question. Thank you. Right. I at least have one more, and then I'll open up one last time. So when you get the offer, how do you know if it's a good offer? It's kind of similar to what was kind of discussed earlier, but are there other things to look at from the offer as a whole to know whether or not it's a good offer?
Yeah, that's a great question. You definitely want to look at what 401k, like what are they going to invest in your future? You know, Natasha had talked about seminars and professional development, those types of things. Ask about your 401k. Do they match? What percentage do they match? What's your paid time off? Is it PTO and it's sick days and vacation days? What does that look like? Does it scale up based on tenure? What do those things look like? Medical, dental, and vision, that's huge. Asking when you get paid, how often you get paid. At Cintas, we get paid every Friday. That's a benefit that people don't understand because that's really expensive for a company to pay weekly as opposed to monthly, but it's extremely convenient. So those are all different things that you may not think of, but they're really important in your day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year scheme of life. And you have to ask those different types of questions because it's not just the shiny salary and the initial number. And Natasha had brought up earlier, and I'm sorry if I'm stealing any thunder with you, but are you getting a yearly review? And what does that increase typically look like? How when you get your next promotion, what does that range look like for that next position? And that's how you start painting the future of this company. And it shows the employer too, like, I'm not just concerned about the now, I'm concerned about the rest of my career. And so that shows to us that you're invested in us when you ask those questions. And I think I would challenge you with this too. During the pandemic, we all had really hard times. Doesn't matter who you were. And our wheelhouse, our products and services to clean, sanitize, stay safe and healthy. But I would say that during this time, I've talked to more candidates about stability. A lot of employers cut back on their benefits, on their giving, on their 401k. They put more burden on the employee. They did not do any sort of promotions or pay increases. I think that's important because if something like this happens again in the future, what's going to happen to you? And again, that's big. That's the whole part of it's bigger than just your job. Like that's your livelihood, your life. So take all of those things into account.
So Kara, you scratch on something that is that's going to be you very unique to this group, right? When you're in the interview process, and it's going to be very telling, and you guys are uniquely situated. Like when I graduated, it was 9/11, right? So that was kind of our unique event. But this is y'all's unique event. You all probably could really benefit by asking that employer what were the policies and approach during COVID-19 with their employees, because you're going to learn a lot. You're going to say, are there layoffs? How were sales? Did your team work from home? Do they still work from home? Did you force them to go back? What were the procedures that you put in place? Did you keep your employees safe? Like all those things, no other graduating class ever had that experience, but finding out how a company treated their employees during the pandemic, I think will be very revealing to you, to this group, because, oh, we furloughed them, right? Well, I kind of want to know if you all think it's completely okay to send me home and not pay me for 3 weeks or a month or 2 months. Major layoffs. I think that was going to be very telling to see how stable that company was, right? I think you can gain a lot of insight for asking that question during this time. So thank you for bringing that up, Kara. Bringing that up just really got my mind working on, like, that probably will be a very powerful question for this group.
Yeah, and I think that if you do your research too, and you ask them, and what you find is not what they tell you. I mean, because again, like, we went through some tough parts with it too. But if I don't tell my candidates that and the why behind it, then that, I think, it's a major concern of, like, you just flat out told me something not true. What else, when we start peeling back the layers, what else isn't true with this offer? And it could be a $75,000 offer, and you start peeling these layers back and you're like, this thing stinks.
Mhm.
This does not look like what I thought it was going to be.
Right.
And that's first of all, thank you for that knowledge and that wisdom, especially when you start talking about salary and what some students may not realize. When we're talking about 401k, that's those like retirement plans, and you pay into those. When you start talking about your healthcare, your dental, there's a chance you may have to pay into those. And so as you're talking about making a certain salary, that number is actually potentially lower than what you think. After all the deductions and everything else, it comes out to a different number. And so with that, those are some other things in asking those questions are going to help you understand, well, what am I really getting out of this? Potentially looking at it from a holistic standpoint. And that's something you should also be researching. So if you're a senior, or if you're going into the industry, start thinking about and learning what some of these terminologies are, because that's going to be very crucial for you to have that knowledge ahead of time to be able to potentially negotiate from there. So we are at 5 o'clock. If it's okay, I want to ask if there's any other final questions. One last question. Okay. Hearing none, I just want to give, first of all, I want to give our panelists a round of applause. You can hit the emojis, you can clap. We're going to do whichever one. Okay, I see some hearts in there. The applause are coming in, the virtual bow. I want to ask, I always love to end on some type of closure of some sort of, if you can, offer just one last piece of advice. It doesn't have to be negotiation wise, but just some piece of advice that we can take home, a life lesson learned that can help us. What would it be?
I would say this. You are in charge of your career. Don't be afraid to open conversations, have them, hold your manager accountable for giving you feedback and understanding about where you are, where you're going next. But you need to own those conversations, and you need to start them and kick them off. You might have someone early on in your career that will hold you under the wing, and they'll keep pushing you along and promoting you and dragging you. But at some point, that person may move on, get promoted. If you don't have them anymore when you're in the workforce, you have to stand up on your own 2 feet. So just start now. No one ever told me that. So just start now. Start owning your career now, and don't wait to have career conversations one time a year. Put a weekly, a monthly, once you got in the work world, a monthly, a weekly on your boss's calendar, even if it's 30 minutes, and let them know what you're doing, how you're knocking it out of the park, and where you want to go next. That's my 2 cents.
I would piggyback off of that too. It just, everything I think comes down to the foundation of hold yourself accountable for a lot in life. It comes down to a lot of things that, like Natasha said, you can control, whether that's in your personal life or your professional life. And sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow, but it's true. And then I would also say, don't ever underestimate networking, because that's how I got into Cintas right out of college. And it was somebody up in Chicago I met that led me to where I'm at. So it's just craziness. And don't be afraid to network. It's just getting to know somebody and have a conversation.
And if students want to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
I'm gonna throw my email in the chat. Email. LinkedIn's good, but I check my email nonstop.
Yes, very true. I'm putting mine in the chat as well. And you can also find me on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, thank you again for your wisdom, your advice.